Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Skift Meetings podcast, the podcast for curious event professionals. My name is Andrea Doyle, and I am the executive editor of Skift Meetings. In this episode titled Safe Not Sorry, I speak with Gary LaBranche, the CEO of RIMS, the Risk Management Society. Sadly, a fatal shooting near the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta, where RISKWORLD was preparing for its final day, gave LaBranche no other choice than to cancel the general session and closing party. He explains what it was like to learn that there was a fatal shooting in the city where 9,000 global risk management professionals and 300 exhibitors were gathered for his conference, a shooting in which the assailant was still at large. He shares that this was the most stressful 4 hours of his 42-year career. We also discuss how a crisis plan should be citywide, how time is precious in a situation like this, and how collaboration is key. We also chatted about why meeting professionals today must also be risk managers. He also spoke about another conference that was impacted by a cyber attack and how even in light of all this, he still feels there is nothing more powerful than getting people together face to face. I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation, and I invite you to check out other episodes of Skift Meetings podcast with tips and insights from today's most influential event professionals. You can find all the episodes on our website or subscribe through your favorite podcast service. So, Gary, you are the CEO of the Risk and Insurance Management Society, better known as RIMS, and it's a professional association serving approximately 10,000 risk management professionals in over 60 countries. Can you explain a bit about your career journey and how you have come to be in this position?
Well, sure. And thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. RIMS has been around for 75 years. We actually engage with about 200,000 professionals throughout the world through our social media and through our other contacts. We have about 10,000 members, but the impact of the organization goes well beyond that, we are a pretty comprehensive professional society. I have been an association professional my whole career, which now is in its 42nd year. I started out after college at The Ohio State University, working for an association, and have had the privilege of working for several, including the ASAE, where I ran ASAE's meetings, education, convention, exposition, certification programs, among other things. Worked at the United States Chamber of Commerce as their liaison to the association community. I was president and CEO of the Association Forum of Chicagoland, which is the association of all the associations that are in the greater Chicagoland area, of which there are about 2,200. And later became CEO of the Association for Corporate Growth, which served the middle market private equity community. I did that job for about 9 years. And we did about 1,000 events a year with our chapters, including a major U.S. convention and a conference for 6,000 in China. And then I moved from there to become CEO of NERI, the Investor Relations Society, which serve the investor relations officers of America's publicly traded companies, dealing with shareholder communications and securities-related issues. And then I became CEO of RIMS on June 1st of 2022, so barely a year and a half ago, and was recruited to join RIMS to succeed a long-term CEO, and it's been a delight. I've enjoyed almost every minute of my tenure at RIMS. It's got a great team, and it's a big industry, and we do big things. So it's very exciting.
Do you see yourself as an association professional or an event professional? And what are the big differences between these two roles?
Well, yeah, I consider myself to be an association professional. Not all associations actually have big conventions and meetings, or even really a lot of events. RIMS does, and mostly through my career, I have been involved as directly as an event professional. Like when I was at ASAE, I ran all of ASAE's meetings, including its annual convention, its annual meeting. But my over the years, my personal career journey has broadened my responsibilities well past just events to include advocacy, public policy, general management, that sort of thing. So I think of myself really in the broader general management terms as an association, or really as a business professional.
How do you explain to friends and family what you do?
I'm an advocate for the profession of association management, so I'm happy to blather on for long periods of time to help people understand the unique and valuable role that association managers play, and have helped many folks over the decades better appreciate that all around them associations touch them and their lives in many ways, and there is this unique group of individuals who learn specialized skills and work in a unique and specialized environment typically with volunteers and with chapters and with all things that make our space rather unique, and often that includes conferences and conventions that could include thousands and thousands of people that we bring together for 3 to 5 days once a year and create an entire city and create an entire experience. And it's an ephemeral, thrilling, and exhausting experience, and it's truly unique.
So your focus right now is on risk management. When it comes to events, is there more focus on risk management today?
Yes, I believe so. In part because of the rise in violence of all kinds, and the threat of violence, but also society is more risk aware than we have ever been before. And you can point to the recent pandemic that I think raised everyone's understanding and awareness of how something that happened across the world, a small virus can create such chaos that and close down whole societies and economies and throw us all into topsy-turvy world, let alone the cybersecurity, the ransomware, all those things. And on top of that is, violence and threats of violence, and the use of social media and other ways to get people, give people fear, to create misinformation, create and share misinformation. I think those things have all combined to make most of us anyway more risk aware than ever before. And I think that's doubly true of those of us who bring together these communities in conferences and conventions, and we're responsible for them. I always love that, you walk in on a Thursday and there's nothing happening at the convention center, and then within days we have built this entire community with all these things happening, and then they leave and it goes back to empty space, but during that period of time, it's like Camelot. During that period of time, it was something special. But it's also true that we built a small city, and like any city, things can happen. Babies can be delivered, and people can have health crises, and people can fall, and people can get sick, and people can commit violence or be threatened with violence, or or they can be attacked by cyber beings. RIMS we had a ransomware attack a few years ago at our convention. The bad actors got into the server that contained all of our PowerPoints and videos for the convention for RISKWORLD, and held it for ransom the morning of the beginning of the conference, of RISKWORLD Conference, right? That was resolved internally. Our IT team sort of reversed engineered and turned the tables on them, and we got all of our stuff back. But these are real, actual things that happen to conventions and associations all the time.
So you had a unique happening this May at your RISKWORLD Conference in Atlanta.
Right.
A shooting occurred 2.5 miles from the Georgia World Congress Center, where you were just wrapping up your final day, for nearly 9,000 global risk management professionals and 300 exhibitors. Can you tell us a bit about what that was like and what exactly happened?
Sure. We had a terrific RISKWORLD convention in Atlanta. We felt we were on top of the world. We were on cloud nine. We're 3 hours left to go in the conference. The weather was beautiful. The hotels performed magnificently. The World Congress Center could not have done a better job. It was just magnificent. We had beaten all of our numbers. It was glorious. We were ready to celebrate. And I came off stage where I had been rehearsing the closing general session, and our director of communications, Josh Salter, came to me and said, "We have a situation. Come with me." And within minutes, I was informed that there had been a shooting 2.5 miles away, and there was a security perimeter around that area. The gunman was still at large. And then I was taken to a room where we met with a variety of folks, including the chief of police of the Georgia World Conference Center Police Department. Now, the Georgia World Conference Center is the only conference center that I know of in the United States that has its own separate state-level law enforcement organization. And we had met with them multiple times in preparation of our convention, and so we knew who they were. We had been to their command center before. We had learned what they do to monitor their 220-acre campus, and so we were not strangers when we walked into that room. And also in that room were people from the Convention and Visitors Bureau and others from the World Congress Center. And let me just sort of take a sidestep here just to say, one of the reasons that we had worked so hard getting to know the Georgia World Congress Center staff and police department, and went up way above board that year, way above normal, on making sure that our security plans were in place, was because Taylor Swift happened to be holding concerts during 3 nights of our RISKWORLD conference next door in the Mercedes-Benz Dome. And so the Riskies and the Swifties were going to be sharing space at the same time. 70,000 of the Swifties every night in pink sequins and feathers and having the time of their lives. And it was, and then we had, 10,000 blue suited insurance people and risk managers. And it was quite the sight. But just think of, from an event standpoint, those are the crossing of 2 great streams of people, and managing the traffic and making sure everyone was going to be safe. So we worked overtime to make sure that we had all of our plans in place. So that's why I say when we walked into the room, there were no strangers. We knew them, they knew us, we knew their capabilities, we had confidence in them. I think they had confidence in us. And over the ensuing next hour, we monitored through them the efforts of first responders to secure the perimeter, to apprehend the gunman, to get a better sense of what was happening. And it turned out very quickly. We learned that at least several people were shot. We later learned that one person, Amy St. Pierre, was shot and killed. 4 others were shot in a health clinic by a person who was a patient there, who was upset with his proposed care. He was with his mother, and pulled out a weapon and started shooting. So that occurred. Police were trying to obviously apprehend that person. First responders were trying to get there to get the wounded people out. And so all this was happening, and then the information starts to come in, and we're listening to the police folks, we're listening to the reports from the helicopters. And then soon they're on, CNN is broadcasting live, and Twitter is abuzz, and all the social media are happening, and this is all happening very quickly on top of each other. And we're receiving multiple reports, conflicting reports. They've gotten the gunman. No, he's escaped. No, he's still hunkered down. No, he's left and he's in a car. No, he got on the subway and is now headed to the convention center. So all of these things are happening. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking. Our general session is coming closer and closer. We were planning for a big closing night party. That was legendary, the legendary closing night party. All this was happening, and now members and board members and vendors are saying, what's happening? And we also quickly realized that the site of the shooting had been secured by the police as they're trying to apprehend and get to the wounded people. And they created a security perimeter that included 4 of the 32 hotels in our room block. And that meant that nobody could get in or out of those hotels. And that also meant that 2 of our 8 shuttle bus routes were closed. And frankly, all of that happening created a massive traffic gridlock. And so really none of those shuttle buses could run. So all this sort of chaos was happening, on top of which we didn't know where the gunman was. So we made the decision to shelter in place at the convention center, the World Congress Center, and to cancel the closing general session. And then we had to communicate that information. And we executed implemented our crisis management response plan, which included sending out a message on our convention app. But as soon as we did that, we realized really only about half of the attendees downloaded the app, despite all of our efforts to get them to download the app. They only about half of them do. And then you realize that people turn off notifications, or they turn off their phones because they're in meetings, they're in educational sessions, they're visiting with exhibitors and sponsors. So we knew that not everyone was going to get that message. So we made up on the spot. We asked the World Congress Center to issue a visual message on their internal messaging boards, their video screens, in front of all the different breakout sessions and throughout the Congress Center. And so we issued a written visual message, which probably got more attention than anything else. And then we used our automated marketing system to start to issue email blasts to everyone. But that just takes a little bit of time. And then through the whole thing, I made a video, and I did it really off the cuff, just because everything was there. All we were getting ready for the general session, so lights, camera, everything was there. So I said, well, let's go ahead and do a video. And so I did a video that we then pushed out through the app and put on our website so that we could say, here's what's happening. You're safe in the convention center. And, and here's what we currently know. And then we made the decision to cancel the closing party for, again, a couple reasons. The gunman was still at large. They didn't apprehend the gunman for 8 hours after the thing, right? The shooting, number one. Number two, the location of the party was just blocks from where the shootings occurred. But most importantly, it didn't feel right. It wasn't the right thing to do in a city that had been traumatized. So out of respect to the victims and their families, and really to the citizens of Atlanta, we decided to do that.
Do you feel that being an association dedicated to the advancement of risk management impacted your actions? Because it sounds like you did everything right in this crisis situation.
I would say that RIMS was as risk aware as any other association could be, because of the culture of the profession, because of the influence of boards of directors over the years, because the fact that we provide content about gun violence and how to prevent workplace violence and active shooter training. We do all that as part of what we do for the continuing professional education of risk managers. So we are hyper aware. And we have lots of resources about these sorts of things. So, and we had a 73-page risk crisis management response plan that we go over heavily, carefully every year. So I think that, and that especially that year, because of the coincidence with the Taylor Swift concerts, we had sort of doubled down on our risk awareness and our risk planning because of everything that was going on. And so we were about as prepared as one could be. And yet at the end of the day, we learned a lot, and we've identified many opportunities for improvement for going into the future.
Was the Taylor Swift concert impacted by the shooting?
It was not. That was they had concluded their last concert the night before, as I recall.
Okay. So you mentioned you had a 73-page crisis plan in place. Is this something you recommend all associations have?
I recommend that all associations have a crisis management plan. And it doesn't have to be 73 pages. In fact, I would recommend not to have a 73-page plan. That's one of our learnings going forward. When you get right down to it, there's a lot of redundancy in that plan. Probably because we are a risk management society, we over prescribed all the different aspects. But it needs to be something that is easy to understand. The response team needs to be carefully documented. The people in the response team need to understand what their roles and responsibilities are. Your communication channels need to be carefully identified and mapped, and then drilled. The team needs to know how to issue that communication on the app. Can you issue a visual communication within the convention center? How do you interface with the police department? How do you reach your shuttle bus operators? How do you reach the hotels? One of the big learnings, if not the big learning from our experience, was while we had that 73-page plan, and while we had many meetings about what we would do and what our plans were, all of our planning really focused on things that would have happened at or to the World Congress Center, to the convention center. In retrospect, now that we have gone through this experience, it became clear that if you have a citywide convention, you have to have a citywide plan, because we hadn't really contemplated what if something happens 2.5 miles away. Under what circumstances could something that happens somewhere else in the city impact our convention? And it's interesting when you go back and you do an after action report on what happened. The shooting occurred directly 2.5 miles north of our location, right in the heart of Midtown. It affected the hotels and the shuttle bus routes where most of our people were staying. Had the shooting occurred 3 miles or 2 miles to the east or the west, and it didn't impact shuttle bus routes, or it didn't impact the hotels, we might have had a different response. Or if the shooting happened 5 miles away or even 1 mile away, and they apprehended or contained the shooter in some way immediately, we would have had a different response. We wouldn't have had to cancel, the last evening. So you have to think through all of those different scenarios. And again, and it's not just about gun violence. It's about many forms of violence and security issues.
I mean, you were about to gather 9,000 people, 300 exhibitors, which is a big group. And then, the last day just got canceled. What was the reaction you got from the group?
Positives. People understood, people commiserated. They put themselves in, our shoes, and they could see, we were running around, going from place to place, and I made a couple of announcements from general session stage. People had gathered in a conference room, and so people understood what we were going through. I think we had exactly one person who complained. They wanted their money back because of the canceled, just for the portion of the closing general session that they felt they paid for. But other than that, no issues. Now, I should also say that the closing reception, the closing party, was fully sponsored and organized by one of our major exhibitors and sponsors. And we're talking about a very serious amount of money. It's a heck of a party. And I gave them tremendous credit. They never blinked. They knew right away that it was the right thing to do to cancel that event. And I owe them a huge debt of gratitude. But everybody understood, not the right thing to do.
And then, so they didn't ask for their money back, the sponsor,
No.
Just because of the circumstances.
Right.
Okay. Other than risk management, what do you see as the biggest challenge currently facing the event industry?
Well, I think risk management is a pretty big one. I think in general, we're all still recovering from COVID. We're all still returning to some semblance of normalcy. Our numbers grew dramatically this year. Obviously, we were back. We were back in 21, but in 22 rather, for our first one. But the numbers were dramatically up in 23. And we expect our numbers to continue to grow. So I think we're all still recovering, getting our numbers back up, and reinventing the conferences to create more compelling experiences, more interactive and engaging experiences. So I think that's definitely an aspect, and re-engaging with the international community that outside of North America. I just finished the meeting about that right before this one, where our numbers outside of North America still aren't what they used to be, and for various reasons. So bringing those numbers back in. But I think people have a hunger to meet. As the philosopher once said, all true living is meeting. We don't really truly live until we engage with other people, and that's when we better understand our own humanity and the humanity of others. And so all true living is meeting, and getting people together is powerful and valuable, and touches the human heart in a way that being on Zoom, or other video conferences just doesn't do.
So you mentioned your international attendees, and we also talked for a story I'm writing about gun violence and meetings and conventions. And in my research, I found there's several countries that have travel advisories in place about coming to the U.S. because of the high incidence of gun violence in this country. What was some of the reaction you got from your international attendees to what happened last year? And is that impacting your numbers for this year?
It's too early to say if it's going to impact our numbers for San Diego in May. We're 2 weeks away from opening registration for that. So, but I just came back from a trip to Japan. I was earlier in Canada. I was earlier in London. I will absolutely agree that it's on the minds of people that are thinking about coming to U.S. destinations. Most of them understand that it's not as endemic as is portrayed maybe in some of the media outside the United States, and it's not as pervasive. But it is a concern. No, absolutely no question. And it's the same with people here in North America who bring it up. We just did a conference in Canada, in Ottawa, for 1,500, and more than a few Canadians expressed concern about their professional counterparts attending meetings in the United States, and are we concerned, and what are we doing, and that sort of thing. So I do believe that the perception of increased violence is something that the meetings industry and the association industry is going to need to deal with. And that's, one of the reasons that I'm RIMS and is working with ASAE and ASIS, a securities related association. I'm a co-chair of this effort, which is a risk management and convention safety collaboration, because we're trying to create more tools for association and event managers to better prepare and develop crisis management plans. We plan to issue a toolkit in coming months that will provide more tangible tools and steps, guidelines, checklists for event professionals to use as a resource to plan their own crisis management plans and to better think through the various aspects of this challenge that we're all facing with, because it's real. And interestingly, because of what happened to us, I've had the opportunity now to have conversations with many others and learn their stories of violence that has impacted their conventions as well. And so this is not theoretical. This is real, and it's a real danger, and it's something that we need to, as an industry, both our destination partners and our vendor community, and certainly the event sponsors, need to take seriously, and we need to address upfront and ask the hard questions.
In the midst of the pandemic, the industry got together and formed Go Live Together. It was 80 founding partners representing over 4,000 companies related to helping the industry recover from COVID. Some people feel a similar coalition should be started to combat gun violence. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the industry needs to come together to better understand how we can prevent violence from impacting conferences and meetings, but also to prepare and plan for inevitable crises of all kinds. And again, I think here about cybersecurity is one that's definitely impacting groups. We had a cybersecurity ransomware attack just a few years ago, where outside actors came in and took control of the server on which we had all of the videos and PowerPoints, for our RISKWORLD convention, and held it all for ransomware, for ransom. And we, it was the morning of our, opening morning, the convention. So that's another aspect of the new threat environment that association and event managers face, and it has to be viewed in my thinking as a comprehensive analysis, not just confined to gun violence per se, but all aspects of violence, as well as domestic terrorism, other aspects of things that could interrupt and disrupt conferences. We have protests usually every year, usually peaceful, and we support their right to peacefully assemble. But we monitor social media traffic. There are there are those who do more than peacefully protest, and we have to be aware of that. So I think that the industry needs to come together and have a serious, fierce conversation and create real tools and provide resources and guidelines for us all to better protect the hundreds of thousands or millions of participants in our meeting, in our face-to-face meetings.
If there was one piece of advice you could give a meeting professional when it comes to risk, what would that be?
We are all risk managers now. We're all risk managers now. And my advice is to take that role and responsibility very seriously. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when something bad is going to happen. That's the way you have to look at it. And you have to prepare for all threats, all hazards, and be prepared. I'm an old Boy Scout, right? So be prepared was the motto. And I think that's the same viewpoint that we have to adopt now. And not just theoretically, not just on a piece of paper or in a file somewhere, a digital file somewhere, but you need to make sure that you have a clear plan, that your team knows what its roles and responsibilities are, and then they drill on it. They have to know what to do in that 5 minutes that you have to learn about a situation, a threat, how to assess that situation, and then what to do. What are your response options? And then how do you implement those response options? Because all of those things take minutes, and in a threat environment, minutes matter. Luckily for us, this event happened 2.5 miles away and was not an imminent threat to our building or our people. Although at first it could have happened to anybody, any of our attendees in that radius of the shooting. We had to determine that. But all of this happens in this traumatic crucible of pressure. And that's not when you want to start thinking about what is our plan? Who does that, right? Who issues the app communication? How do we do that? That's not when you want to be thinking about that.
I mean, you've been an association professional and event professional for years. Would you say this was the most stressful part of any event you've planned or been part of?
This was the most stressful 4 hours of my 42-year career.
Wow. Okay.
And I wish it on no one. And I'm glad it happened to me. I'm glad it happened to RIMS. Our colleague Stuart Ruff Lyon was chaired the PCMA board, and he's the head of my of RIMS event and meetings. So Stuart and I were in that room along with Josh Salter, a trained crisis communication professional, right? And so you had 3 really experienced people, association and meetings professionals. And we were in a room with, trained law enforcement people that had, been working in emergency preparedness and response for decades. So a wonderfully trained group and who knew each other, were not strangers to each other, understood each other's competencies and had confidence in them. So if it was going to happen to anybody, I'm glad it happened to us.
It is ironic that it happened at an event like yours.
Yeah. And again, we had actually done active shooter training, 3 days before this incident occurred, because that's one of the things we do.
And you did that amongst your team, or was that part of training for attendees?
For the participants in the conference, attendees. So we have, risk management is a very broad field. So risk managers do worry about and do prepare for things like preventing workplace violence, response to active assailant situations, those sorts of things. So, our members work for corporations, universities, hospitals, school systems, government agencies, and you look at what's happened just this year alone, and active assailants have touched all of those places, and active assailants have have touched, movie theaters and parks and theme parks and school systems and all of those places. So wherever people gather, concerts, festivals, wherever, especially wherever thousands of people gather, unfortunately, it makes an attractive target for people that have either compelled by mental illness or compelled by other reasons to commit acts of heinous violence. And we just, we see that every day in our news. But I will say that it's real. It can happen anywhere, to any size convention, in any city, and it's got to be job one for us going forward in the next few years to figure this out.
Well, this was fascinating. We always wrap up our podcasts by asking for a recommendation as who you feel we should have on the next podcast, and one question we should ask that person.
Oh, wow. Gosh, I didn't prepare for that. I talked to somebody who maybe has experience in risk management or safety and security for festivals or other large-scale public events, ballparks, for example, that sort of thing. Because that's it is a distinctly unique thing. It's securing a school is a very different challenge than securing an opening reception in downtown San Diego, which is in the gas lamp district, where we're going to have our opening reception in May, extending blocks and blocks and blocks. Or at a sporting event, So I think that those are all things that we need to learn more about.
Okay, great. Well, this was fascinating. I thank you so much for being part of our podcast.
I'm happy to be here and happy to share the story. And thank you for helping get the story out.
My pleasure.